Hello and welcome to Beyond the Paradigm. My guest today is Dustin Nemos, a researcher who has his own website called the Serapeum.com, and he's also a popular advocate of biblical earth theory. If you enjoy this episode today, could I first of all ask you to give it a like? And secondly, if you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to the channel. Well, Dustin, it's a pleasure to welcome you back on to Beyond the Paradigm for the second time. Welcome, brother.
Thank you for having me back on, Paul. It's good to be back.
Yeah, so like I obviously emailed you, I wanted to talk to you about Antarctica, and I've been looking a little bit into that. I've listened to some podcasts regarding it, and I've obviously done an episode on flat Earth where Antarctica came up, and I've looked at your website, and you've obviously got a mountain of information. So what would you say then? I know it's quite a broad question, but what is Antarctica?
Well, there's a lot of ways to answer it, like from a conspiracy and historical perspective, from a like government conspiracy perspective, especially. But cosmologically, we could go into it. First, I guess I'm a biblical earther. That's way beyond flat. I think that the Bible is absolutely accurate and proves true when you test it. And it describes essentially a snow globe world with a physical firmament barrier on top, holding back the waters above that make our sky blue. And it's a young Earth, about 6,000 years old. The genetic evidences hold up for that as well. Things like mtDNA mutation rates, etc. We also can show that it is hollow. It is geocentric. It's the center of the universe. A lot of flat earthers prove that. Of course, it's flat. That's a big one. That's where a lot of the argument and the drama is at, and a lot of psyops and drama and such. But it's also sealed. It's fixed. It's the center of the universe, and everything rotates around us. There's so much to it that some of those folks don't go into, and some of them touch on but don't cover completely. And I'm not saying I cover it the best. I just think I'm the only one covering this biblical earth aspect, which is far more detailed. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what it is. It's the rim of our world. Antarctica is the outside of our flat earth.
Yeah, like I said to you just when we were talking a little bit before, I've got obviously an episode that I've done with Flat Earth Dave, and obviously talk about the dome and everything and Antarctica in circles,
Yeah.
and that's why we don't fall off the end. But just before we go deeper into Antarctica, there's just one question I wanted to ask you. It's because I'd seen a video last week on YouTube by a guy who biblically he's sound. I've listened to him before, but he's currently doing a series on debunking flat Earth. And one of the questions he raises, which I mean, listen, I'm not a scientist and I don't know enough about it. So, but I'm going to ask you, how do you explain meteors in a flat or a biblical Earth model?
Well, I'll pull it up and I'll show you something.
Hmm.
First of all, meteors don't exist, and space is completely faked in essentially what is a Hollywood basement, just like the Red Hot Chili Peppers song says in the lyrics. But in terms of what meteors are, um, there's different ways that you could get the same kind of effect. Let me pull it up as an image. Just give me a second to find it, because I have thousands of images now because of the debates that I'm doing, where I'm trying to always have an answer for every thing that people ask me. So just give me a second and I'll find it.
Okay.
Let's see, cosmology. I'm going through all my files. Uh, there's electrical discharge, and there's also water effects, weather ways that you can get these kind of things. And sinkholes are another one, but there's an image that I have that just really nails it for you. I will get to it in just a second. There it is. I had to find it. Okay, so first image, one of them. Oh, I can't share screen. Will you
Hold on,
activate it? Yeah.
yeah, I'll do it. Let's see.
Yeah, there's the other one. Got it. There's two of them.
Just let me, I'm a little multiple participants. Right. Is that allowing you to do it now, or no?
Yes.
Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, we have what's called electrical discharge craters. This is something that has been largely proven by a guy named Barry Setterfeld, or Field. And that's kind of what they look like, very similar. Another image I will switch over is this one. This shows volcanoes, geysers, sinkholes, sulfur pockets, hydrocraters, and extinct volcanoes, which might also be part of the waters from below aspect way back in the day. But what happened at the top here is complete CGI and fake. We didn't get hit by rocks from space. None of these were caused by rocks, and they all look the same. So that's basically the short answer. And there's always an answer to most of these questions. Sometimes we don't readily have it, and sometimes the person that you're asking may not always have that answer. I have most of them just because I'm an archivist, and that's what I do. I archive this stuff and I go debate it. So I enjoy it, and I want to be able to have those answers to restore confidence in God to people, and that's part of why I do this. But most people don't take that level of like trying to defend the Bible and trying to find the evidences to prove God. Or many Christians don't even believe in flat Earth, which the Bible is clearly a flat Earth book.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you, because I knew you'd probably know an answer to it. Because I mean, I don't know enough to be able to sort of answer a question like that anyway. And I just thought, the guy posed an interesting question. I thought I would ask you. So
Yeah.
moving on from that, obviously there's the Antarctic Treaty, which was signed in 1959, and it entered in force apparently in 1961. That's what I read. And obviously we can't go beyond the 60th parallel. And this is where alarm bells start ringing for me regarding Antarctica. Yeah. Why do you think that we're forbidden to go there?
Okay, so this is the beginning of a saga. And first of all, this is from my article on the Serapeum.com. It's called Antarctica, the Outer Space Within the Ice Wall Surrounding Our World. Because this is our only outer space. I mean, we have parts of the ocean that are unexplored. We have Antarctica that's unexplored. There's many parts of the world people have never even set foot, but there's no such thing as outer space. That is a complete lie. And there's no evidence for it. There's a bunch of strings and bubbles and near drowning incidents and a bunch of nonsense and curving rockets and just complete actors being busted, contradicting, witness statements, even from, astronauts that were there together. One says it was red, one says it was black, total CGI type, even pre-CGI. I mean, like the first globe Earth blue marble was actually painted. And then everyone after that, you can invert it on Photoshop and you see boxes pop up because they're basically CGIing it all. And people have pointed out how they don't actually fit each other. They're disproportionate. Like the continents are 10 times the size on one, et cetera. It's an easy way to debunk the official statement. But this image that the official position, but this image I'm showing you here basically summarizes the saga. In 1908, something called the Nimrod expedition on a boat called the Nimrod went out there, and you can still find it on Google Maps, set up Point Nimrod. And this, by the way, Nimrod is the bad guy from the Bible in the Old Testament who built the Tower of Babel and tried to kill God. He is also the founder of the Freemasons, and every single bad guy god that you've heard of, from Baal to Moloch to Chemosh to Melkart, all these guys, same guy, different languages, different tongues. It's all Nimrod, and it's the same story over and over and over again. So our many different mythologies are built around this guy. So someone in the secret societies who knew something was going there. Shackleton, I think his name was, famous explorer. And here's an image of him in Antarctica on that expedition. It took him a few tries, and it was incredibly dangerous, life-threatening trip in those days. Now we have icebreaker ships and stuff. It's a little bit safer. Still, you can't go there. They'll shoot you. Operation High Jump, 1946, under the famous Admiral Byrd. Everybody kind of knows about him. He was on national television talking about how there's mountains of resources that will never run out of coal and metals and stuff just beyond in the ice, and no one's claimed it, no one's exploring it, and it's all there just sitting to be taken before he was killed and sort of silently given a weird death at the end there after he was basically the General Flynn of his time. He was the most decorated youngest admiral ever. This guy was a renowned superhero and a famous Arctic explorer. So they commissioned him to send out Operation High Jump, and he climbed the giant ice wall around the edge of our world, a 200-foot high jump, and started to explore with a naval fleet. In Operation Deep Freeze in 1955, they were exploring for secret military bases and such, and they got into a little bit of a spat with something that destroyed like a large portion of our naval fleet during this time period. Not too long after that, 1958, NASA was founded, and their symbolism is about a serpent's tongue speaking through a flat disc, which tells you a lot right there. We don't even really go into the German Antarctic expedition and New Schwabenland and the British war against the Nazis there's a bunch of drama that happened there. None of that even matters really to the larger story that's unfolding here around the hiding of God and the faking of space. That's really because all governments are in on this or being deceived by it. And that's where this Antarctic Treaty comes in. 1959, all of these governments sign on to this lie and to agree that you can't go explore the ice rock full of resources that nobody wants for some reason. And they're going to spend a lot of money to make sure that you don't go there. John Kerry goes there for some reason, but you don't get to go there, except for like the little tourist thing. Fast forward to what's called Operation Fishbowl, which happened at the same time as Operation Dominic. So these two, 1962, just look at the symbolism here. It looks like a sword and a nuke kind of at the same time. And then down here, you see the symbolism as well. It's like trying to electrify God, I guess. There's like an electric bolt going up towards down towards God, but then it's like shooting fire backwards or something. I don't even get that one as much. Anyway, Operation Fishbowl of God, because that's what Dominic means, Fishbowl of God, or the firmament, was essentially them trying to nuke the firmament for about 2 or 3 decades. They just kept sending up big bombs into the upper atmosphere. I forget how long it lasted. Multiple governments were involved, and there's videos of it, old black and white stuff, but you can still find these videos on the site or elsewhere. So this is Fishbowl of God. They were trying to break the firmament and get to God. Once again, they couldn't do it. And then they decided to start faking space and hoax us all into this false paradigm where we're nothing and there's no God, and evolution is in, and fallen angels can suddenly be our alien big brothers. That's essentially what's happening here. Apollo 11, 1969, the moon landing was all to fake space. And there's other things that we could add in there, little details that down there on the left you can kind of check out. But that's kind of the big part that I wanted to go into about Antarctica. That's the drama. That's the agenda. That's who's behind it. Which, if you follow that rabbit hole, as always, it's the Jews behind it. Specifically, this started back in Rome about 500 years ago, a couple hundred years ago, under a guy named Cardinal Wolsey, with his learning against learning strategy, which was papal approved, to basically start generating large quantities of government approved fake history, fake science, fake news, propaganda, which is something that we've all been inundated with these days. Now it's sort of reached its fruition. It's not even working anymore. They're pushing rope at us. But back then, they were pulling off Galileo and Newton psyops with these occultists like Newton, who spent his life copying and translating these occult works, and stole the idea of gravity from the Emerald Tablets of Hermes, which he translated, etc. So these occultists were giving us fake science and psyoping us with it, just like the astronauts today, except for they were smarter in those days. The astronauts today are spoiled with all this CGI stuff, and if you trip them up with the wrong question, they look stupid, even in congressional hearings and such. And there's videos out there like Astronauts Gone Wild, where they're destroyed. Their credibility is absolutely destroyed, and they're exposed as antichrist in many cases. Basically, what you have are I call NASA the Freemason Actors Guild, and that's basically what you get. Many of them are compartmentalized. They don't really know what's happening. And even the flight director for Apollo, Gene Kranz, said himself that the simulations were so advanced that even the participants could no longer tell the real thing apart from the simulation. And this quote is also on my article on space and such, and biblical Earth. So you only really need a few secret society types like the Freemasons to pull this thing off, and you compartmentalize everything else. I mean, NASA's the biggest buyer of helium in the world, and all of these satellites that they're claiming we never see on any of those images of space, which are fake. Well, I mean, they would be up there banging into each other, but they're just none, right? Or stars. They never have stars either. But what they're really doing is they're floating satellites on balloons, just like China has been busted doing over and over repeatedly recently. So we've had a taste of their science breaking down, and actual science is winning the day. I don't know if you've watched any of my debates or Whitsit's debates or Flat Earth Dave's debates, or there's others out there as well, like Jaron and others. But we're just basically wrecking these guys left and right, and they just are afraid to debate us. I mean, non-Professor Dave, he's not a professor, but Professor Dave finally debated Whitsit and lost like 30 percentile or something from going in to coming out of people who flipped toward flat Earth. It was a wrecking. I mean, it really is. And that's what happens every single time.
I mean, for me, like, I've not believed in the moon landing for, I don't even know, 30 years, probably longer. And I've interviewed Bart Sabrell twice on here, who did the documentaries, Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon and Astronauts Gone Wild. So I know I'm 100% certain, that the moon landing were completely faked. And because they lied about that, then why should we believe them about anything? And I don't believe them about anything. I've seen the images from the space station, and they are like basically flying around on wires, and it's just so obvious. But people don't want to see it. It's like during my last interview with Bart, one of the things that he said that it's like a god to them. This moon landing, this Apollo 11. This is the thing. It's Apollo. It's their god. And he interviewed one guy who was a professor at some university over there where you are in the States. And he basically said to Bart, listen, even if, Buzz Aldrin or Neil Armstrong would have got up on the stage and said, we didn't go to the moon, he said, I still would have believed we went to the moon. I mean, that's how unbelievable that people are entrenched in their position. And obviously, people will be the same regarding the globe. And what I said on my last sort of interview that was out sort of last Friday as we're recording this with Dave Weiss, I said that, people are entrenched in that position of the globe because it's propaganda, isn't it? It's all we've ever known. We've grown up with if you went to a school, a state school or whatever, I remember, your teacher, they had a globe on their desk. It was there. It's been there the whole time. And like you said, I mean, it seems to me from everything I've looked at regarding, flat Earth or biblical Earth, that, and then obviously the globe is trying to hide God. That's the key. I think Dave Weiss said to me, he said, like, obviously a lot of people in the flat Earth community are not Christians. He said, but he doesn't know any that don't believe in a creator. At least if they're not Christians, they still believe there's a creator.
That's why I'm here. I'm going to win them over because there's only one God that tests true.
That's right. Amen to that. Would you say Antarctica is like the key to flat Earth?
I would say that the Cardinal Wolsey aspect with Rome and the Galileo aspect around like Newton and these so-called scientists that they were using to psyop the public and fake victim, etc., to trick them into this globe Earth belief. I think that is the greater culprit. That's where it started. And what we see in Antarctica is just them trying to hide the evidence that they're lying. We're seeing massive evidence everywhere of God right now, from the genetics to the archaeology to the cosmology. Every science is proving God is real, and they can't cover this up anymore. They're trying to stop what they can. They're blowing up ancient buildings. They're they're turning these things into like UNESCO approved like heritage sites. You're not allowed to go to some of these things anymore. Like Göbekli Tepe, I think you're not allowed to go to anymore. The WEF or something took it over. We just covered that. I was on with Flat Earth Dave earlier this morning, and it's not gone public yet, but we were talking about these issues and why they're hiding it and stuff. So Antarctica is a big chapter when the evidence started to hit and they couldn't hide it. And that leads into the story of faking space and the moon landing and NASA and all of this stuff. Because they saw God. I mean, not literally, but they saw proof of God. They hit the firmament. They found it. 800 miles, whatever. I don't think there's other puddles. I don't believe that. I think that we can debunk that. I know that others are speculating on that. But I think the science and the scripture are in sync that this is the only puddle. This is our only world, and there is nothing outside of that firmament except heaven itself. It's holding back the waters above, and I don't think you can leave this puddle to go to another puddle, so to speak. And that's what some people believe, that there's different puddles and there's different ice walls, holding them in and such. And it's all pointing back to God. That's why they tried to blow it up. They were trying to escape what they see as a prison, or they were trying to attack God again.
It's interesting you mentioned that about other puddles, because I've read this book. It was recommended by Dave, actually, Dave Weiss.
Yeah.
And I just found it bizarre. I've got to be honest with you. But my problem is I realized that this book here, The Hidden Lands Beyond the Antarctica, is actually the third book out of a series. So when I started reading it, I'd actually started halfway through and I didn't realize. But just for people who basically don't know about it, this book's called Hidden Lands like Beyond Antarctica, and it's the continuation of Morris' journey between interconnected planets, and it's regarding navigator William Morris, and apparently he had a daughter called Helen Morris who was born beyond the ice wall in the other lands. And it talks about giant humans and all these different planet domes and all this type of stuff. I mean, it talks about the great ancestral library. And I just found it quite bizarre.
Yeah.
But you don't believe that, you literally believe that this is it, like
no, I think ancient maps and ancient myths and the Bible are all in sync on this. And then these stories of lands beyond the ice wall basically came out with the era of fiction, when it was cheap enough that you could lie en masse on paper. However, people were not like putting this stuff into their sacred writings on the walls that took actual labor and investment, etc. Back when you had to chisel this stuff into stone to record the most important stories for the world or for history or for your culture or whatever, or your religion, etc. Often these are in the temples and such. And often they're skewed perspectives of history. I mean, a lot of these all these other religions are a twisted, babbled version of Genesis, essentially, and Nimrod's story. But kind of lost my train of thought there a little bit, but I think I answered it right.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I read that book, I just found it so bizarre. And the first I'd ever heard of Hidden Lands Beyond Antarctica was when Dave mentioned it to me. Didn't say he believed it, he just sort of mentioned it and said it's worth looking into maybe. But I mean, when I read this book, I just read it that it was complete fiction. But obviously Admiral Byrd is, I mean, the quote is what he apparently said was, strangely enough, there is an area left in the world today, an area as big as the United States, that never has been seen by a human being. What do you make of his expedition and sort of what he said there?
He was being honest as much as he could. A lot of that was probably classified, and they shut him up, and then he died mysteriously after being like lifelong honor, etc. I kind of want to point out with this image that the way that the sun and the moon demonstrably seem to work in our actual world in reality is that they're circling around the equator here, which is the center of this circle, the center of the plate. It's not around the fat globe ball that's spinning and projecting through space like a water-covered cannonball followed by a shotgun blast of shrapnel, while also teeter-tottering 3 times different ways. That's all fake. However, the sun and the moon, just like the Flat Earth app that Flat Earth Dave puts out shows, it's basically circling in the center here, and you can navigate the same way, east to west, just like the sun does, east to west all day long, but you can never navigate north to south. But the point I want to make is with what we see with the sun and the moon basically staying in our own puddle, or if you correct for the actual map, if you look at the so-called jet streams, for example, they're basically just following around the sun and the moon. And that's why hurricanes will bounce off in different directions around the equator, and almost never will they cross the equator, because there is a literal wall of air following the sun and the moon in a big circle around the, you know, I think that we never ever see the only sun and moon that we can find circling other ponds. It never crosses Antarctica. It stays in our pond, etc. So I think that we can show, just like we're showing the world's flat, I think we can also show there's no other ponds through discernment and deductive reasoning. And I know that this is a new argument. This might shock some people or upset some people who want to follow that other train of thought. But the Bible says this is it.
Yeah. What's your thoughts then regarding, like, obviously the hidden bases in Antarctica and advanced technology?
Oh yeah. I've covered some of that. There's the HARP stuff that they've got the ability to create like weather weapons and weather modification and such, earthquakes that they can create using the HARP stuff. And there's been whistleblowers who've talked about how they have these little things embedded in the ice for miles in grids, and they use it and et cetera. And this guy had the key to everything because he was like the engineer, like had to repair everything. So he knew everything better than everyone else. And there, he was not compartmentalized. So he's just spilling full details of this system. He's probably dead now. I don't know. I forget his name off the top of my head, but that's all on the website. There's a lot of stuff they're doing down there. There's secret bases, there's secret research stuff. John Kerry and others keep going down there. Whatever it was, Buzz Aldrin had a heart attack and had to be medevaced out of there with whatever he saw. And then he came out, according to his own friend's witness, saying they're back and it's still going to happen again. So that's perfectly in line with what I'm saying, is that the angels are now the aliens. The fallen angels became the aliens, and they're back, just like scripture prophecy predicted when Enoch and elsewhere. They're back for the last battle. This is it. And there is a non-human bloodline that's our deep state. All of the stuff that's happening is exactly what was predicted to happen in prophecy, if you understand how to look at it. If you think 1948 was the fulfillment of prophecy, then you're going to be completely skewed around everything. You're going to think Russia is Gog, and you're going to think like the West is supposed to support Israel, baby bombing and such. In reality, 1948 was the Rothschilds and the Balfour Declaration has nothing to do with scripture, and there's no verse in there that was fulfilled with 1948. The actual verses that were fulfilled, the new land that was given to the people when David was promised this as he ruled the kingdom and said, you'll get a new land elsewhere after your punishment, etc. This new land that they were going to be given was America and the UK and Europe. That fulfilled prophecy. That fulfilled specific verses like Leviticus 26:18 down to the math. America is the new promised land for the lost tribes of Israel. So is the UK. So is France, so is Germany, so is Irish and Scottish, which are one clan that got separated, etc.
I mean, regards to like the modern state of Israel, obviously I don't believe that that's the Israel of God. It's, like you mentioned, Balfour Declaration, Rothschilds. It's satanic, it's Luciferian, and the fact that you've got a lot of evangelical Christians, particularly in the United States, that ravenously support Israelis. I mean, that was a Rothschild's plan anyway. How do we get them on board? And that was obviously where you bring in Cyrus Scofield, the Scofield Bible distributed through the Moody Bible Institute, and that's what permeated the United States. But what I would say regarding the promises of God, they're all fulfilled in Christ anyway. All the promises are fulfilled in him.
Well, there's prophecies to be fulfilled at the end. All that stuff's got to happen. And some of it's happened already, and some of it's happening now. But like you'll never understand scripture if you don't understand, for example, the seed war. Because, for example, the seed of the serpent has usurped the position of the actual chosen family of God. The actual bloodline of Satan, like the giants became small. They are no longer cone-headed as much, some a little bit. They are no longer gigantic. They don't have a 20% more brain capacity than us. They usually don't have 6 fingers and 6 toes, but some of them still do, like Halle Berry. But the genetics are clearly different. They admit this. It bears out with ancient examples of Canaanites and Hittites, etc. The chosen family of God, Europeans, was replaced by the actual bloodline of Satan, the fallen angels. They're not human. And this is a very offensive thing to say, but this is exactly what God warned us about. And, I put this verse here of all the people that were left of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, which were not of the children of Israel. Their children that were left after them in the land, whom the children of Israel were not able to utterly to destroy, because we did not kill all the giants as we were ordered to in Scripture. People say that they all died off. No, they did not. They got small, they bred in, they became the Jews, and they are our deep state. They're faking space to hide God, and they want you to believe in aliens as your as your big brothers from the sky. They are monsters, and that's why they're baby bombing. That's why they're faking prophecy. But you won't understand the Bible until you understand the seed war of Genesis 3:15. Communism, Zionism, it all came from Marxism. Genesis 3:15.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't expect you to believe me, but it holds up. They even admit it.
No, I mean, I know about the seed war, and obviously I believe in giants, know about the Nephilim. I've covered them quite a lot on here. I've had different guests on. And obviously there's a particular bloodline, like, is it the royal families? It's something like RH negative. It's like a rare bloodline, and that's why obviously they all keep marrying within particular families. And obviously, archaeological evidence where there's sort of depictions of smaller human beings worshipping these larger individuals who are sat on thrones. Obviously, we know that they are obviously the Nephilim.
Yeah.
Now, regarding other beings, obviously Admiral Byrd, when he was in Antarctica, I mean, I've heard a few different versions, let's say, of the
Giants.
story, but one of them is like that when he was flying there, some craft, brought him to some type of base, and he went, they took him to meet, I can't remember whether they called him the general. He met some other being anyway. I mean, what
Some
do you
giants.
make
Yeah.
of that? Is that what you believe it were, the
I
giants?
I believe that it was secret society propaganda, and that he was a Freemason and he was allowed to say certain things, but mix in lies. The giants are not our friends. They are not some peaceful organization or kingdom living in the earth. They are our bloodthirsty enemies who have a history of sacrificing even their own babies and cannibalism. We get the word cannibal from Canaanite priests of Baal who would eat the baby's flesh after sacrificing them on the fire alive. These people are no joke. They're still doing this. They have been kicked out of 100+ countries for eating babies, like St. Simon of Trent. It's even after they lost the gigantism, they still remained as evil. God destroys the entire species of Edom in Obadiah 18, coming soon.
What's your thoughts on sort of other dimensions? Because like when I spoke to Dave Weiss, he doesn't believe in interdimensionality. He believes that, there's these extra lands and these beings are coming from there into our dome. What's your thoughts regarding like other dimensions? Because obviously like these fallen angels, they can come in and out of this world, and they're coming from somewhere. Where do you think they are? It's like, because obviously God, we know
Yeah.
God is not our spirit, he is spirit, and we can't see him, but he's everywhere at once. And obviously when Christ came to earth, he entered time and space. So where do you think these beings are coming from? Do you believe in like
Well,
interdimensionality?
yes, but it's what the Bible would call spiritual, or we call it multidimensional or whatever. Even top ufologists agree with every ancient mythology that these things came from behind or from below or from beside, from a portal, but not from above. And the evidence doesn't suggest that they're coming from above. In fact, they wouldn't be able to get through the firmament. And in fact, they're not even allowed to go back up. That's the irony here. They're no longer allowed up there. But they have ships and such, and Satan is called God of the air, because he is God of this world, and the airways, etc. He is flying around, sure, but they're no longer allowed for the most part. For example, the Genesis 6 watchers are no longer allowed in heaven. They are damned, and they're just sort of waiting for their punishment. They were imprisoned in the earth for 70 generations for making the monsters, and they will be thrown in the fire for making these monsters. But for a short time, since around the time of Roswell, just like one Enoch said, boom, aliens raping everybody, polluting the seed, polluting the genetics as in the days of Noah, giving us technology, and suddenly sin and abortion are going through the roof, just like in the days of Noah. It's the same thing happening again. We are very close to the end.
So what do you make of the abduction phenomena then? Do you think do you think maybe they're taking
Genesis
people
6.
to Antarctica,
It's the
to
same as
these
Genesis
bases?
6.
Hmm.
That's what an alien abduction is. The first alien abduction was Genesis 6.
Hmm. And
Where
where do
they
you think
where they
people
take them,
go?
they got all kinds of places to take them, and
Hmm.
I'm sure these people would rather be dead than be there. Uh, I can't imagine the horrors, but they
Hmm.
take people. Hundreds of thousands of women have disappeared to certain colonies somewhere underground or in Antarctica or somewhere in certain wars that were just never accounted for.
Yeah, I've interviewed an abductee who was, I mean, she's wrote a book called Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest, and she claims to have been abducted multiple times, and it's a frightening story, and obviously it does sort of there's a lot of similar type of stories regarding this where they take obviously the eggs of a lady or and also the sperm from a man, and this is sort of like a common sort of theme that runs through these abductees testimonies.
Yeah. Well, basically, I represent this right next to each other on this image, the elongated skulls that the hybrids were alleged to have had throughout history in every mythology and every culture, and in the bone structures that we find, etc. Non-human physiologies, often gigantism as well. Early on, they got smaller, their skull got smaller, the little hat stayed there on top. Early on, they had the fish hats all over the place, like the bishops. You see, all the early mythologies had the fish hats shaped like that head right there. Well, the aliens are often depicted as very similar with that sort of similar noggin, because it's the Nephilim returned. They're trying to basically it's the fallen angel progenitors of the Nephilim, and they're trying once again to make children. Prophecy talks about this at the end, where it said they would try to cleave to man. I forget the exact verse, but they would not be able to mingle. Well, they're trying once again to Genesis 6 us and make titans and take over the world and destroy all human flesh once again and become gods like they were in the Genesis 6 all the way up to the flood era. Even after they were imprisoned, they were worshipped by the giants during the age of Atlantis. They are the harbingers of doom, the destroyers of mankind, the source of evil. These things are bad news and they want to destroy us. And there are alien big brothers from the sky now, thanks to their Jewish grandchildren. But this image goes into what I was just showing you earlier a little bit more in depth. It sort of starts off over here with the NASA stuff, and I also mentioned that giants existed. But then we go through like the geography lies, the biblical cosmology, like the existence of hybrids, megalithic structures. Carbon dating is totally debunked, 6,000 years old ish, proved in a number of ways. The theological censorship, they hate God and they try to hide God. They are using billions of dollars to hide God. And there's every government on earth that signed that treaty as part of it, at least. And the rest are just diluted by the big guys, probably. Evolution is completely bankrupt. There is no missing link. There's a number of problems with it. mtDNA mutation rates, et cetera, irreducible complexity. Just look up any of those things and you'll find answers.
Yeah.
Ancient Hebrews, white Indians, white Native Americans that spoke Hebrew were here with copies of the Ten Commandments before Columbus ever came. There's a lot of other things that we could go into about that. But secret societies and this satanic element have been going on ever since Nimrod made himself a giant here, started choking out all the lions and saying, I am God King. And he wants to kill God and get revenge for the fall of the fallen angel religion. That's what he was bringing back. He was essentially reestablishing the pre-flood empire, saying he was campaigning for president of the world on the ticket of we're going to kill God and get revenge for the flood.
I often think like Satan and all these underlings, like they're all massively deceived. Like, I often think, does Satan himself actually think he's going to win? I mean, he knows he's created, he knows how powerful God is, and it's like is he that deluded, or is he sort of thinking he can get out of it on a technicality? It just
Well, he's damned and he's angry. And in fact, these Genesis 6 watchers, I mean, the Lucifer character that we know of in the Bible, the Satan that was allowed to roam about seeking whom he may devour through all of history, he was actually not one to have a monster baby. He didn't breed with human women. He was the one that didn't have babies, because that punishment was for all of the other fallen angels to be locked in the earth for 70 generations. They're now out and they're angry because the last thing they saw when they were above ground was their children killing each other for 500 years, as according to God's curse, which God wasn't trying to be mean. He was just saying, look, they're going to kill each other because this is what you've done. This is what you've unleashed. And what happened? The clash of the Titans. These things, when they mate with a human woman, pure angel and pure human, half, make Titan. Their hands are still sticking out. Their skulls are still sticking out of the mountains all over the world. These things are absolutely real. You can crawl through like the nasal canal of a giant elephant that's the size of a mountain at the backdrop of a city. I mean, these things are real. I've covered the Titans, but they got smaller through dilution with human genetics, of course, because there were no more fallen angels. They were underground. They got smaller. Plato even wrote about this, how the Atlanteans mingled too often their holy seed with the human population. He was a secret society type. He was worshiping these things, and he thought they diluted their DNA too much before the fall of Atlantis. So this is an element throughout all of history. But in essence, the Titans had a 500-year lifespan, puberty that never stopped because they had no growth inhibitor. Just like most things have a growth inhibitor gene, ligers don't have a growth inhibitor gene. If you breed a lion and a tiger, you get a liger, it becomes the size of a tank, it'll eat everything until it dies. If it ever escapes, mankind is going to have a problem. It'll get into the wild, it'll eat everything, it'll outbreed everything, it'll start making monster cats that will come for us 2 to 3 years after they run out of food. That's what happened with the Titans, but it happened fast. Fathers were eating their own sons, just like often is depicted in Greek mythology of Saturn eating all of the god children that he was producing, not because he wanted to keep them from overthrowing him. You know, he was the size of a mountain. He was starving. Imagine the amount of calories that you need just to keep your heart beating when you're the size of a 30-foot or 40-foot or 50-foot tree. And these things were the size of the ark itself, according to God's word. So the science is there. This absolutely holds up. We have the bones. They're sticking out of the place all over. Titans were real. They got smaller. They became giants. They got smaller. They became Jews. Demons are just dead Jews.
In terms of like the hybrids, I mean, I'm under the impression that the hybrids are actually sterile because a liger can't,
Oh,
like you can only get a liger from obviously a lion father and a tiger mother.
this is a misconception. They are, in fact, highly fertile. And if they escape, it's trouble.
Right, okay. Because and also, I mean, regarding the Nephilim, I mean, obviously, I can't say this for definite, but again, I've been told that they were sterile. But how can any of us actually know? Because we
Well,
weren't around.
it was a bloodline thing, father to son, for example, in Bible history as well. I'll point to Canaan in the post flood world. He was the father of all of the giants. All of the Canaanites were the giants. All of those people were the ones God said, leave nothing alive, quote, because they were all monsters, man, woman, and child. I mean, God is given, people don't even think it's the same God in the Old Testament as the New Testament because he was so mean in some ways, because they don't understand these things were not human. They were monsters. They would grow up to eat us and their own babies. They were never meant to exist. They were a monster hybridization of mixing the species, something that was not supposed to be done. So, and that's exactly what the fallen angels were teaching people too, is to mix species like we're doing today, sinning against all the flesh. But these things can escape, they can breed. And if they were to do so, it would cause a massive problem in a short time. Nature would be thrown out of balance. All flesh would be corrupted and everything would be increasingly hungry and violent, just like in the pre-flood world.
Just just at this stage, just what I want to say is for anyone who's tuning in for the first time and never listened to this podcast before, when Dustin and I are talking about Jews, we're not talking about your average everyday person who follows Judaism, who, we're talking about specific um bloodline here, like Dustin's been saying. We're not just on about your
Not the
average
religion,
person
but
who
yeah,
lives. No, we're not talking about someone who's obviously converted to Judaism or whatever. We're talking about a specific
that's
bloodline
its whole
only.
problem.
Um,
That's a whole
so
different problem. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Judaism itself is antichrist. I mean, it is an evil
yeah.
religion, but it doesn't make you a monster to join it, physically speaking, at least. I mean, you have to basically look at the Bible and then renounce Christ and not see him in the Bible to be a practitioner of Judaism. It was actually formed in response to Christianity earlier, younger than Christianity, but in response to it to deny Christ in Scripture. That's what Judaism is about. So anyone who converts to Judaism is denying Christ, essentially. And they love to see that. But the actual bloodline, like these, the Dukes of Edom, the Bible calls them Amalek. Edom says there's war every generation with them. I mean, look at what they're doing to us. Look at what like the George Soros types, or look at what the Rothschilds types are doing to us, doing to the world. They're behind Israel. That means they're behind the baby bombing. They're basically like the royalty of the synagogue of Satan. They're the Dukes of Edom, like the Bible says. And we have war with them all the way up to Obadiah 18 when they're completely wiped out by worldwide revolution. This is some pretty hot stuff I'm saying, by the way. It's very spicy. I understand it. You're going to get banned everywhere. But it's the truth. The Bible holds up to it.
So one of the things that I do keep hearing regarding like the flood and regard of the Old Testament and Christians, I think it's like almost like they're apologetics, or they're saying, well, listen, God had to flood the earth because of these hybrids, and that's the reason. Well, actually, that's not the only reason. The reality is that if you are only saying that God flooded the earth because there were these hybrids, then you don't understand how wicked sin is and how holy God is. It wasn't just the fact that there were these hybrids running around. Mankind himself is wicked. I mean, it even said that his heart was only continual evil. He was just thinking about evil all the time. So in terms of the flood, the reason for it is because God was eradicating wickedness, not just the fact that there were these hybrids running around.
I take the position that Noah was saved because he was pure in his genetics or generations. Basically, like we know the term pure blood today for all the people who are not jabbed. He was the last pure. Him and his family were the last pure bloods in that era. Everybody else took the jab. Everybody else was becoming a monster, and he was warning them for a long time as he built that boat with his sons. Don't take the jab. Basically, some context, whether they were selling superpowers or telling you that you're going to die if you don't take this thing, they were corrupting all flesh. So Noah was saved as he was pure in his genes or generations in Bible talk. And I don't think that God was flooding the world to wipe out the giants or there would be no more giants. I think God was flooding the world to reset the garden because it was overran by weeds and he wanted his creation to not perish. And his creation was saved with Noah and his bloodline. And that's where you get Jesus. That's where you get mankind, etc., except Ham and his wife and their sin and the chromosomal effect and the epigenetic effect, which we can show the science, but that is where you get all the giants from. Thanks, Ham, because they did take wives from all flesh being corrupted. And I think that's why all of the humans that were no longer human at that point were increasingly violent at all times. Not only was there mass starvation going on because giants were hoarding everything and ruling over everybody as god kings in the age of Atlantis, but then there was just this genetic aspect. And that's kind of what the seed war is about. There is a bloodline. There's a bloodline of non-humans. They used to be easier to spot. It used to be real obvious to say they're not human when they were way bigger than us, had 6 fingers and 6 toes, and munched on people, just everywhere like hot dogs. That's not the case anymore. They're no longer physically dominant. They haven't been since all the way before the time of Jesus. But when we see the time of Jesus, the same group of people, by that time, Edom was calling itself Idumea. So what happened was John Hyrcanus I, the king of Judea, a Judahite of the family of Judah, an Israelite, European man, same bloodline as what we call Europeans today. He basically conquered Idumea. He conquered the Jews. He invited them in, said, follow our laws and you'll be one of us. Well, they killed his son, and with Rome's help, they took over. Herod became the king, a Jew, and he killed all those babies to stop Jesus. And Caiaphas became high priest, a Jew. And with Roman soldiers' enforcement and using made-up hate speech laws off the cuff, he killed Jesus. That's what we're facing again now. Hate speech laws made up off the cuff, redefinition of anti-Semitism. If you say things like Christ is king or Jews killed Jesus, you can be locked in prison for life in Canada. and they're euthanizing everybody. So that's a death sentence. If you say it in America, they haven't yet made it law, but they want to deport you to a war zone in Gaza so that you can die for
I
saying
mean,
it.
yeah, it's a massive spiritual war, and anyone that can't see that, I mean, I'd say willfully blind. Like I say to people who are unbelievers, I say, listen, there's a spiritual world interacting upon this world all the time, and you can see it play out in every sphere. It's like at the minute we've got a general election coming up, or a general selection on the 4th of July. And I don't often have the TV on, but my wife had just left it on in the background, and I was listening, and the garbage that they're speaking, like, it's all this climate change, and all the same old stuff that you're hearing. It's just like they're all saying the same things, and all this is obviously part of that war. These are just puppets that are being used. Um, like you said before, it's like we're getting towards the end now. I mean, one of the um, I think I might have mentioned this last time we spoke, but for me, it's like this transgender agenda is like, it looks like that's one of the sort of final signs that we're at the end, because when you look at,
Yeah.
the destruction of many civilizations, they became obsessed with gender. I mean,
Yeah.
prior to the Hitler taking over in Germany, I believe that there was transgenders and all kinds of things there at
Yeah.
that time.
The Nazis basically rose to power and burned all the transgender books that were being pushed on their young children in school because of all of the evil being pushed by Jewish organizations like the Sexual Institute, or whatever it was called in German, under Magnus Hirschfeld, who basically pioneered modern transgenderism. But this goes back to worship of Semiramis, which we know as Ishtar or Isis or all of these other Aphrodite under these different names, the wife and mother of Nimrod. So their ancestral demonic giant blood mixture relationship was the creation of the unholy trinity of the occult world. The dying and resurrecting sun god figure that everybody keeps saying is Jesus was a copy of that. It wasn't, and there's nothing even close to it. It's
Mm.
more like the dying and resurrecting sun god, which is Baal, Nimrod, Osiris, Apollo, etc., like the Bible Apollyon end times. That's anyway. And the actual dying and resurrected Son of God, totally different. But like, if you just don't look at anything else, that's all you get. They look kind of similar. Like the virgin birth was only Jesus, for example. People like to say these other things, they didn't have virgin births.
Mm.
They all had actual, like, a mother involved, and a father involved and a
Mm.
son. And that's where you get in any language, there's different ones, but it's the Nimrod, the Semiramis, and the Tammuz, and the unholy trinity it's always represented.
Yeah. The devil's trying to counterfeit everything. So there's always a counterfeit, always. Um, I mentioned obviously the Nazis then, and one of the things I did want to speak to you a little bit about, going back to Antarctica, was this sort of secret war between the British and the Nazis.
Yeah.
What went on there?
Well, the short version is that the Nazis were bragging about their new impenetrable ice fortress, and the British hunted it down, found it, and destroyed them, and New Schwabenland, etc. And this was a big part of actually ending the war, in some ways, although it's little known and people haven't really looked into it. But this was basically part of the German U-boat submarine like empire that was out there for a secret base, a secret Antarctic base, and they had sort of for a time there they had the monopoly on U-boats. It almost won them the war because of their advanced technology and such, which is why we kept all the Nazi scientists and killed everyone else. But it was basically just a secret war to hunt down the Nazis, what was left of them at the end.
Wow. I mean, that's one of the things that interests me regarding how the Nazis rose to power. The fact that after the the First World War, Germany was basically in ruins. And then the next news, they had this massively powerful army. And that's clearly because of the occult sort of, interactions that they were having with like
Yeah.
demons or fallen angels, whatever, that they sort
Well,
of exploded with technology.
I would say that the one of the aspects, and I don't defend Hitler, I think he was a controlled opposition, but he did do some economic miracles. Even his enemies admit it, and he basically kicked out the Jewish banksters and started to use their own currency. And this turned everything around very quickly, and it was sort of a historic miracle. I do not approve of any of the full society or secret society crap that they were doing at the high levels, like the officers and up, like every other time in history, were corrupt. They were doing all the secret society stuff. The average Nazi was just like the average American, a good Christian who did not want transgenderism pushed on their children. With that said, the army aspect of Hitler, I mean, they had the most diverse and multicultural army ever assembled. I mean, you had Sheik, Muslim, and Christian united against the Jew and basically Russia. And that was the Bolshevik Revolution, which was the Jew. And in so doing, it was an almost successful overthrow of their power. But then we had a brother war pile-on because of Jewish control of Western fake news. The West piled on to our European cousins. The other lost is a brother war between the lost tribes of Israel. It's what they specialize in, and they're bringing another one now. They want to get Russia and the West to kill each other.
Oh yeah, that. I mean, the predictive programming regarding that is unbelievable. I mean, one of the things they've been doing over here is every now and again they've been drip feeding people information because I do a bit of prepping, you know, because I haven't got loads of space where I live, but I'm doing a bit of prepping. But even the UK government's coming out now and telling people, you know, make sure you've got some extra food and you've got yourself a torch and you've got yourself a battery radio. And they've even created a website now for all these things. And that's because they are pushing for a war with Russia. That's clear.
Well, they're going to get it because they're on control. They're in control currently of all sides. Putin is a Jew. Trump is they're both crypto Jews. They hide it. Putin did not used to hide it, but they're both crypto Jews. They're involved. Trump is going to come in and win, and he's already promising to nuke or at least bomb Russia and China. We will have World War III, and they're already across the West moving to conscription and draft laws. In the U.S., they just raised the age limit. In France and Germany, et cetera, they're instituting it, and they've already in the U.S. brought people back out of retirement through stipulations in their contract, which is a form of draft and conscription. And then they tried to force vax them. So, I mean, if you've seen that video going around that was kind of viral of one airman, I think a soldier, I forget if he was Army or Air Force or what, but he was basically held down in his room and just manhandled by like 6 other guys. And then they later force vaxxed him, I think. That's what they're planning to do. They're going to basically conscript all the white people, force vax them, and send them off to war with no training to march through landmines and artillery fire as the Russians are just like, why are you killing your own people? Just like they're doing with the Ukrainians. And Zelensky was already bragging about the new multicultural Ukraine as he is shipping off the elderly, the infirm, and children to the front lines. There will be no white people left.
They're getting obliterated, Ukrainians. No matter what the Western media tells us, they're just getting put through that meat grinder. Unbelievable.
It's new.
I'm ex-forces, and if I'd known back then what I know now, I would have never have joined up the army. I was serving in Afghanistan, but I can assure you I won't be going anywhere else for these lot. Not a chance. I mean, they will have to they'll have to kill me because, I mean, I've got my this is my old regiment's t-shirt on. You know, I wear it because I just sit around in it in the house basically, but. You know, and I've got medals which never see the light of day. They're just in my drawer upstairs because it's not until later on in life when you learn other things that you realize, you know, I was in Afghanistan for a massive lie and I wasted time there. You know, I mean, in terms of when you're out on the ground, this is what I would want to say to people who were like, well, you know, obviously, yeah, it was a lie and all this, but when you're being shot at, none of that matters anymore. You're there and the rounds are coming down and your buddies are beside of you. You all just want to go home to your family.
Well, I mean, you see the Ukrainian drafted, conscripted men who are being chained to the trench walls by their Jewish superiors right now. They're going to get what they want everywhere except maybe armed countries. I think there may be some resistance in the U.S. They're not going to throw me in a van and force me to the front lines. I can tell you that. However, I think that they will get a lot of people through fear and through force. And I think that they will ship off a large percentage, if not a majority, of the young white Christian population, which is already 8% of or less of the world, and half of them are jabbed and fertile. So we're already almost extinct, and that's the plan. That's what they write about. That's what they plot about. That's what they teach in their rabbis and synagogues. That's what they train their rabbis on in the Talmud, is the destruction of the white race, because we are the true Israelites. Not all whites, by the way. Not, I don't think Russians are, for example. There's other white families other than Abraham out there, but Abraham was blessed to have not only numerous, like massive amounts of children, but there were 12 to 13 because they were a double blessing under Joseph. So 13 lost tribes of Israel out there that were unaccounted for. And the Jews are claiming to be of Judah, and they're not. They have no evidence for it. But what happened to everyone else? Nobody seems to want to find out because it's a convenient lie, and everybody's staying with it. But when people wake up to their true history that was stolen from them and realize that the Bible wasn't made up by the Jews to deceive us, but it was stolen by the Jews to deceive us and inverted and changed. And the word Jew was injected 1400 years plus after Jesus, who warned us all of this was going to happen. I mean, he kept calling them seed of the serpent, synagogue of Satan, generation of vipers, like etc. Warned us about the parable of the wheat and the tares, how they look like wheat, but they're not, and they're going to be burnt. And every plant not planted by my Father will be thrown in the fire, etc. I mean, he was constantly rebuking them, constantly calling them demons to their face, and that's, I think, why they killed him. And every single time this truth comes out, there is a revolution, and they have to kill everybody to stop it. This is kind of what triggered the Bolshevik Revolution. The truth got out. They were eating babies. The lead prosecutor and the priest that was a part of the case both wrote famous books that were part of the banned list and prosecuted list first off. As soon as the Bolshevik Revolution started, these were like the first books banned, the first people arrested and tortured and etc. Because this truth got out to tens of millions of Russians that they were in fact eating babies, and they got busted for it. And when this were, in this case, poking them full of holes, drinking the blood, I assume they ate the flesh too, but that's what they do, is they poke the temples and the body full of holes, etc., with their little owl devices that are in their little Talmud scroll things. This has been recorded numerous times, but it triggered the revolution in Russia. They had to come out, take power, and kill everybody. It's happening now.
Yeah. I
If
mean,
they don't kill
Satan's
us
a
all,
murderer.
I'll start a revolution myself, because so many people are waking up to this right now.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Satan does. He's a murderer. Christ said that. He's a murderer from the beginning. He's a liar. So, you know, it's not no wonder that, I mean, obviously he wants to kill Christians because we're the ones who obviously tell people about Christ. We preach the gospel.
Yeah.
And Abraham has many children, and his children are all those of the faith because he's the father of the faithful. And obviously Satan hates that. You know, from all nations, from all kindreds and all tongues, he would eradicate us all in an instant if God was to, you know, sort of lift his hand off this world completely.
I want to be specific here, because I mean, I have an Asian wife, mixed kids. Like, I'm not like a white supremacist by any means. I'm trying to be true to the definitions of the Bible, etc. Israelites are 100% white, just like Adam and Eve were. And by definition, you cannot be an Israelite if you're mixed. My kids are not Israelites. I'm an Israelite. And that's fine. They can still be grafted in through faith. And that's, as you're saying. In the case of any human out there, they're all welcome into this. But the plan of the deep state, the plan of the Jews, the stuff that they write about, plot about, etc., is to kill all the white people, outlaw Christianity with the Noahide laws, and enslave the brown, yellow, and red people after they've killed 99% of them too.
Is that what you
So
think?
I would rather be dead than a slave. So it's actually better for the whites in this scenario, but we'll be extinct and then the world will be enslaved. That's their plan.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'd rather be dead than be a slave on this earth anyway, because I know where I'll be. I'll be with the Lord. And even if they did enslave me on earth, I'm still freer than they are, because God's free men, you know, God's bondmen, sorry, are freer than any man. You can be freer than these people, even in a prison cell, because whom the sun sets free is free indeed. So when Silas and Paul were in prison, they were singing hymns because they were freer than the jailer who was locking them up. So
Yeah.
there's nothing they can take from us. Yeah, take our lives. You can't take our lives really, because what's our life when we're removed from this scene of time? All that's happening is we're being taken from one place to another. God even says in his word that sometimes what people don't consider is that when the righteous are taken, it's a mercy to them, because then they won't see the evil that's coming. So Satan can kill as many Christians as he wants. He's still going to lose.
God harvests every so often his favorites anyway.
Mm.
People, some of his favorites were taken out, so to speak, before the flood happened. So only Noah was really left of the purebloods. But there were other people God liked that maybe were older or whatever, and he took them off the board, etc. Um, it is a mercy sometimes to be taken out of the way. But what we're about to enter, I believe, is the Great Tribulation. I think it's synonymous with Trump's second term at this point, and I believe he is the son of perdition, the Antichrist. But I know that's not a popular opinion. I'm getting a lot of flack on Twitter for that right now. In fact,
Mm.
making some waves apparently. People hadn't considered it, but no one else comes even close, according to the biblical verse and definition and descriptions. So I think we're there. I think we're in end times. I think we have about 10 years left. I think all these things were written in prophecy. And at this point, it just seems kind of obvious. Everything's falling into place.
Yeah, there seems to be a quickening. I mean, I wouldn't, I'm never been one to sort of label people the Antichrist, but I have recently
Me
started
either.
to think that the Antichrist, I mean, in my opinion, I'm not going to name names because I don't know who it is, but what I do believe is that he'll be a homosexual. I believe
Yeah, I've
that
seen that verse.
that's
A lot of
mm,
people believe that because there's a verse that says he doesn't really care about the approval of women, essentially.
I mean, I'm
Um,
not guaranteeing that. It's just my
yeah.
opinion. I mean, I'm open to being wrong, and it's not a fundamental of the faith. It's just something I've sort of
Well,
mooted with myself.
the only character in all of Scripture who qualifies as the son of perdition is Nimrod, because he had to die and come back from hell. It was the beast that was and is not and yet will be.
Mm.
That beast that ascends at the end is Nimrod's spirit reborn. And, I think that what happened is essentially we invaded Iraq to get the body of Nimrod, and then he injected it into Trump. Um, but that is, and it's basically what happened with Nimrod is he injected something and became a mutant monster later in life. He wasn't born that way. So Nimrod is the only figure in all of the Bible that is the antithesis of Jesus, the only one who could be that beast. And Trump is the fulfillment of that resurrected spirit of Nimrod, I believe. Um, the reason I say that is because not only are 90% of the book of Revelation red alert sort of signs happening right now, alarms all around us if you pay attention, like the draining of the Euphrates, the woman in the stars, very specific stuff that's really rare. It's all happening at once right now. And I'm not a doomsday. I mean, as a lifelong atheist, I'm not a doomsday prophet. I'm not somebody who's going to like point at somebody and say that's the Antichrist because they're evil or whatever. I don't think Obama qualifies, even though he's evil. I don't think Prince Charles or William or anybody else qualify, even though they're evil, even though they're rich, even though they got a lot of bad symbolism. The Bible's very specific, and it could only be a Nimrod resurrected as Trump. And Nimrod, the point I'm trying to make is Nimrod was into women, even his own mom, but he didn't care about their approval. And that particular verse, and I forget how it goes exactly, doesn't say that he'll be gay. It basically says that he doesn't care about women's approval. And grab him by the pussy, Trump. Color me shocked.
Yeah, I mean, people, the mind boggles regarding Trump, because a lot of people are like, I mean, I've even spoken to Christians at my church who like Trump, and I've sort of said, "Do you know anything about him?" And when you start
Yeah.
giving them a little bit of his background, they're shocked. Um, because obviously he sort of plays on. I remember when there was the riots over there, you had the BLM riots and they were burning churches. I think he turned up to one and he stood outside and obviously was holding a Bible up. But
Yeah.
so what? Like, so what? But he goes to the
Yeah.
Wailing Wall with his little skull cap on. So that shows you where his loyalty is.
I mean, Obama pretended to be a Christian too. I mean, you can't just pretend to be a Christian and like take a couple photo shots right before. But by the way, you came out as Christian basically right before he became president. So that was an election technique or tactic anyway. Like, let me just convert to Christian and run for president. so I get the Christians' vote. I mean, it was very obvious. Politicians have been doing that since the time of Christ. Most politicians in the Christian world had to pretend to be Christian in order to maintain power and authority. So this is just more of that. Even the Pope pretends to be Christian. At the end of the day, they're just liars pretending. They do not suffer for it. Not really. Even Trump, he's lost money, but he gained more. He was invested in the vaccines. He's now richer than ever, etc. He's not really being persecuted. He's being used and given free publicity. Example, when the bank runs began a couple months ago, the never-ending Trump arrest began right afterwards to distract people from the bank runs, because they want you looking at Trump, feeling like he's your teammate, he's taking hits for you. They don't want you looking at the destruction that is being caused by policies that Trump put forward and also Biden put forward. Trump's the one who started the hyperinflationary massive money printing. Oh, free money, good things. Well, the Bible actually says the Antichrist would do things unlike his fathers. He would give away some stuff. He would buy people's votes. And that is something that Satan's always really done, is using money. So if he gives us a tax break and then vaccinates 1 billion people, I don't see that as a win. I would rather be poor and my grandmother's still with us. But now she's dying because she took the jab.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wild ride that we're going to go on, certainly.
I want to share
very,
something
very
if
soon.
I can.
Yeah, of course.
This is an infographic I made. We don't have to hit it all, but this is a summary of pretty much everything. It's on my Trump article at the Serapeum that's titled "The Truth of Trump." But if you just kind of, for example, he started World War Gay, where we started as the U.S. government began to bully other countries into approving gay marriage, etc. And now we're just spending all of our money to promote transgenderism and LGBTQ in their classrooms and such in other countries. He promoted not just the vaccine, but also the booster, and also attacked people recently like RFK Jr. who tell the truth about it. So he's still pro-vax. He didn't pardon Julian Assange. He pardoned this spy and other spies from Israel who then got caught doing other things like this other Ponzi scheme he got busted doing afterwards. He used his executive authority to violate the First and the Second Amendment anti-Semitism laws, the bump stock ban, but also to institute the national tracking system on land, sea, and in air that he was bragging about. He said his blood is the vaccine, which would be consistent with Nimrod using his blood to change everyone with the mark of the beast, which I would say is Operation War on the Seed, or Warp Speed, which is all about 666 mind control, the lost tribes of Israel, and basically it's Hebrew for mark of the beast. So if you look up what the Antichrist is supposed to be like, there's all these actual descriptions, and one of them is that he's stout. The other one is that he would confirm a peace treaty. There's a lot of things about how he would be a forceful leader or charismatic, etc. Well, I don't see most of the other people out there even close on any of those points, and he's by far the stoutest world leader, and he has about 2/3 of the world loving him. No one else comes even close except The Rock, and he's not even currently running for anything, although he's talked about it. I think The Rock is the only person more popular than Trump, maybe. Space Force, look at the symbolism of his hat, which he had sold through his website officially. This is the Baphomet upside down. The symbol is just like NASA. We talked about that flat disc and forked tongue. That's pretty much all of the Space Force logos too, and all of the other NASA equivalents also. I think Space Force is basically to stop Jesus coming soon. It's not going to work. But it's the Nimrod, Tower of Babel 2.0 force. And that's what they tried to do before. He's already been crowned king by the Israeli Heritage Foundation with a big old Torah crown or Talmud crown, as he was praying to Hashem, which means Asmodeus. That is not God. That is not the name. God's name is Yahweh. God has a name. He told us his name. It's not Hashem. He not only is replete with symbolism like the black cube, the 666 stuff around his towers, and the inverted pyramid and triangles and such, which is the sexual symbol. which is presumably, I assume that he knows what that is because he went to the Wailing Wall and he did the hump the wall ritual, which is meant to impregnate the Antichrist spirit and bring about the son of perdition. So they go there, they put the little hat on, they touch the demon wall of Temple of Jupiter, and they move their hips back and forth and do this thing. And you can see Trump, he was really into it. Like he didn't even try to hide it that much. He had sex with that wall. That's what they do when they go to that wall. That's what that means. And all the world leaders do that. It's weird, right?
Weird, yeah.
I could just keep going, but basically, he's done a lot of bad things. And he's also said things like, I am the chosen one. His surroundings and backers are all Jewish, Chabad type Jewish, high level synagogue of Satan type stuff that we see. Well, what has he not done is my question. He even has a fake Ark of the Covenant in Mar-a-Lago. This guy is pretending that he is Jesus. He said, lock her up. He locked us down. He said, drain the swamp, etc. He then complimented her. He's not going to do anything. And at best, he's stupid or weak. And at worst, he is outright evil. And I think he confirmed that recently when he basically said, get her done for Gaza. And I made this little image because get her done implies the coyotes carrying away the dead Gazan babies. That's what's happening right now. That's where we're at right now, thanks to people like him. So I do believe that he is, in fact, the son of perdition. I think his history, his pattern, everything shows it. And now he wants to, as the son of perdition is supposed to do, behead the anti-Semites. He's going to bring back beheadings. He's going to put it on national television, and I'm going first.
Well, Dustin, it's been a wild ride. I'm sure there's going to be a few comments on this episode. It's good stuff. We need to talk about these things. There's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. There's a lot of evil out there. There's this hidden technology. There's all kinds of things, playing out. And I'm not going to put a date on it, but I believe that I'm not going to reach retirement age. I'm 45 at the end of this month. They've put the age of retirement up now to 68 over here, but I don't believe I'll get to that. I think, I'm not saying people shouldn't sort of save for retirement. I'm not giving people financial advice or anything, but I don't think there's going to be long. It just seems like, everything's coming to that. And this business with Russia, it seems like they're pushing us towards that war with them. But it's been fascinating talking to you again, Dustin. It's been, like I said, it's been a wild ride. Thanks for rescheduling, because obviously we were meant to do this. And you've got the countdown there.
Yeah, this is the countdown to the end of the world, roughly speaking. So I just wanted to, according to the prophecies, they're all pretty much lining up on this. I was a lifelong atheist, and I was the Trump supporter. They called me the king of QAnon. Okay, so I lost everything. I went from invite dinners at Mar-a-Lago with $80 steaks to I buy my shoes and my children's shoes at Goodwill, and I complain about the prices. But I believe absolutely what I'm saying here.
There it is. Well, one thing's for sure, there will be an end, and that is a fact, as we know from the scriptures. It's only a matter of time. In the sermon I was listening to on Sunday, one of the things that we haven't got a pastor at the minute, but one of the standing preachers said, Christ's people are always waiting. They were waiting for his first coming. He came, and now we're waiting for his second coming, and I believe that's at the door. Yeah. For definite. Yep. So just before we go then, Dustin, just remind people about your website, because it is information packed.
Okay, so theserapeum.com has all the articles we looked at tonight. I've got DustinNemos.com with more information about me and some of my interviews and such. This will show up there. And Nemos News Network is where I cover what's happening in the news and how they're about to try to destroy us and famine and draft, all that stuff. Kind of the exoteric and the esoteric all at once.
Well, like I said, Dustin, fascinating stuff. It's a wild stuff as well. We've got a lot to think about. But one thing I would say before we go, and it's something that I've been thinking about recently, is, you know, we go down these rabbit holes, but just take your head out the rabbit hole, guys, for a time and spend some time with your family, because that's important. You know, be with your family. Time is short. None of us know how long we've got left. We need to obviously, you know, speak the truth. We need to tell people about the Lord. We need to tell people about what's going on, but don't neglect your families. So it's been fascinating, Dustin. Love to get you back on again at some point if you just stay on for 1 minute after.
Sure.
I'll be back next week, guys, with another guest who's done mountains of research like Dustin, which he has done. If you go to his website, the serapeum.com, have a look on there. Hundreds and hundreds of articles, videos, all kinds of things. So thanks again, Dustin. I'm Paul, and this is Beyond the Paradigm.